sound like Skynet.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We are going live on Facebook. We are in the middle of, boy, April 10th, 2025. We are less than 3 months into Trump 2.0, and
Yeah,
astoundingly,
astoundingly.
and Pastor Hughes and I were just talking, and we are here. So, for those of you who haven't met us before, I'm joined by Pastor Wylie Hughes, who is the senior pastor at Orchard Park Presbyterian Church. I am Rabbi Jonathan Freirich, uh, rabbi at large in Western New York, and running an organization called Open Door Judaism, attempting to pursue justice for everybody in as many different ways as we can, specifically justice in a correcting the injustices of the past sort of way, make way for a future of greater equity and equality. And and if you haven't been paying attention over the last 3 months, you might not you might feel that all is well and fine in the world and life, the universe, and everything. But Pastor Hughes and I were just talking about how do we cope with our general feeling of despair.
Yeah,
How did you put it, Pastor Hughes, that you don't believe that African Americans will ever get a fair shake from this country?
I don't. I don't believe that this country will ever do right by African Americans. And when I said that on the phone, I had never spoke that out loud before. Because that was the one thing that's the that idea has been tucked away in the deep, dark recesses of my mind and of my heart, and I've really fought to keep it there. I never wanted to fully admit that, um, because that's giving into despair, right? But lately it's there. It's in the forefront of my mind. It's almost a daily thing. Like, this is never gonna
So
it's never
I
gonna
am not going to be
change.
a Pollyanna because I am going to be the opposite of that. I'm going to be, appropriately skeptical.
Okay.
Uh, and I'm going to say that this country has not been designed to give anybody except a very small select people a fair shake. That this country has not been designed to do right by anyone except for a very small segment of people with the greatest of advantages,
Yeah.
and that is by design, not by um, PR, right? That the brilliance of the American experiment has been that the only people who take seriously what we say about ourselves are women, African Americans, and immigrants.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
you know, maybe going forward, Native Americans in recovery from genocide also have tried to take seriously, because, of course, Native Americans, Indigenous Americans did try to actually respect the words as written on treaties.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So there is a significant contingent of everybody else, all of
Yeah.
us who are not the the elite,
Mm-hmm.
who have really tried to take seriously the words that we write about this country:
Mm-hmm.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness,
We hold these truths to be self-evident, right?
due process,
Yeah.
uh, you know, the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
That those concepts and the equity and equality and freedoms embedded therein
Mm-hmm.
have only ever been taken seriously by the people who have not been served by them yet.
Right. Right.
and that and that the people who are best off, the people who benefit most from the system, have never thought that it was to be shared.
Mm. Right.
That the Civil War was fought over that.
Mm-hmm.
That Reconstruction was an attempt to implement it, that failed because of redemption.
Mm-hmm.
That civil rights was an attempt to re-implement it, that failed because
Yeah.
what we are now of what we're now in the second redemption, we can call it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And so the question therein, and we've talked a little bit about this. I mean, I feel very strongly that uh, white male ruling Americans do not care one whit about public education.
Right.
That
They never
white
have.
Ameri that white Americans have never thought education was important because education would have to be shared.
Yeah.
The only people who have prioritized education have been women and
Yeah.
African Americans and immigrants.
That's right.
Uh, so if that is the case, your analysis is correct that this country, as currently formulated,
Hmm.
will never do right by African Americans, by Hispanic Americans,
Women.
by women, by immigrants.
Hmm.
You know, uh, we will sporadically do right by Jewish Americans until we can dispense with them.
Hmm. Yeah. Sporadically. It's a good word.
That
Yeah.
that for all intents and purposes, giving advantages in the United States is conditional
Hmm.
and done so for the advantage of the most advantaged, and then taken
Hmm.
away when they're done with us.
Yeah.
So that being said, there was a in on freedom. Timothy Snyder talks about the since he's a scholar of Eastern European history, he looks at the solidarity movement and the Velvet Revolution, and he says that one of the key elements to those revolutions were human and civil rights that were on the books
Hmm.
in Eastern Bloc countries. That the the people pushing solidarity could do so because the laws were already there.
Right.
So our laws are already there.
Yep.
And, you know, notwithstanding the degree to which the Supreme Court is more than willing to disregard those laws,
Hmm.
notwithstanding the fact that our current presidential administration is willing to entirely disregard those laws, that
Yep.
the Department, which is tasked with upholding the law, is entirely willing to dispense with the laws and the
Hmm.
rule of law.
You're right.
We need to do a number of things to change this. So, one of the things we've been talking about is this idea that we can actually affect things on the local level, on the state level, on the city level,
Mm.
much better because we don't have to contend with people who are uh, hell bent on sacrificing the rule of law.
Right.
Uh, what does it look like in Orchard Park, where, your church is situated, if we begin to organize and show up at school board meetings? If
Hold on one second. I'm getting a call. Sorry
that's
about
okay.
that. Let me take that. Boom. Uh-oh. Did I lose you? Okay.
No,
All right.
you're
All
still
right.
here.
Um, I'm sorry. So
What?
continue.
So we are a small group of people who are overeducated,
Yeah.
who have connected with a smaller group of people who have some disposable time and income.
Hmm.
So what if we show up as a group at a school board meeting in an open session and say, this is what we want our schools to look like? What if we show up at a town council meeting during their open session and we show up organized, not
Hmm.
angry, but determined,
Hmm.
with suggestions, not protests, but
Not demands.
but programs?
Okay. Hmm.
What does that look like?
Well, one thing that I've learned about the community of Orchard Park, the village and the town of Orchard Park, is that they're very oriented toward optics, how things look and how
Well, everybody
things
is.
appear. Well, more so, more so on the surface level here.
Yeah, okay.
Um, and so it would very much depend on how we presented ourselves, right? Um, Rather than what our agenda might be. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes.
And I
So
say
so
this because
presentation matters.
presentation is everything here. Well, and like you said, in most places, but here specifically, like very, very specifically, because I have, you know, um, attempted to put a lot of those issues on the table in those arenas. But because I did not look the part, I was largely ignored, and and to the point where, you know, after the fact, after the event that we put together, no one showed up for it, even though everyone was, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. They never showed up for it. And then after the fact, someone came to me and said, you know what would be nice, Pastor, is if the church would host this thing. And I said, we did that 2 weeks ago. And they said, oh, I thought that was something else because I did not recognize the people that you had on your panel. So there's this idea that, and i I'm trying to be very politically correct here. I don't want to disparage my community,
Diplomatic.
but at the same time, if you're not from here, if you weren't raised here, and if you aren't connected to someone who has grown up here or raised here, you don't exist. Like it's not mean, it's not malicious, it's not, you just don't matter. Like they don't, people just don't see me. They don't see me. Even if I'm standing right there, they don't really see me because they don't, because I'm new, I'm a fresh face, but also I have no connection to anybody there. I clearly didn't grow up there. I clearly didn't, I wasn't raised there. I clearly have no business being here.
So this is so central
Yeah,
to your and my, reason for being here,
right.
right? Why are we taking half an hour or an hour out of your busy schedule and my busy schedule to 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 talk this way? We are
Mm,
because you speaking on TikTok or Instagram and me speaking on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook is not nearly as powerful as the two of us doing it together.
it's true. It's true.
The coalition we build is more important.
Mm,
So before we show up to a town council meeting, before we show up to a a school board meeting, our coalition needs to be in place.
hmm.
And that coalition, as you just said, if we're dealing with Orchard Park, but really if we're dealing with any place,
Any place. Yeah,
needs to have locals,
that's right.
needs to have recognizable stakeholders,
Hmm. Hmm.
and and you and I may in fact be the worst point people.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Uh, but that's why we need more than one of us.
Right. Right.
And, you know, thinking about the regulars in our group,
Mm,
Kay and Allison and, um, our and our other Orchard Park Friends group people,
right.
they know people as well.
Yes, they do.
And so maybe, so here's a radical idea. Considering this is our sort of brainstorming what next session done writ large, and we encourage everybody to offer us comments on Facebook, to
Mm,
join, connect with us on opendoorjudaism.org, to
yeah.
connect with Pastor Hughes, wylevhughes@gmail.com, to connect with me, Rabbi Jonathan at yahoo.com. Connect with us and tell us what we need to know. Tell us what we need to do next. Tell
Hmm.
us how we can work together
Right.
because we don't have the answers by ourselves. We only have
Right.
the answers when we come to it together. And, you know, what I am so attached to with regard to your and my conversation, Pastor Hughes, is the fact that I've changed because of our acquaintance, because of our relationship, because of our friendship, because of our partnership. I am no
Hmm.
longer the person that you first met in
Right.
2023. I'm
Right.
significantly different.
Likewise. Yeah.
And that required both of us to let down our guard, to trust that we were in it together, and to listen and say, huh, this person is going to say something about Palestine that I don't like.
Hmm.
This person is going to say something about being an American that I don't like.
Hmm.
And I'm still going to listen.
Hmm.
And I'm going to listen to the thing that has been said and accept that the person who says it because they care.
Right.
And that this is we look at what's happening today, right? I just saw Desi Lydek on The Daily Show um, describe the public interplay between Peter Navarro, the
Yeah.
theoretically pro-tariff voice in the Trump world, and
Hmm.
Elon Musk, who has come out against tariffs.
Mm.
And Peter Navarro goes on, what has become the national news channel, that Fox News, and says, uh, of course, Elon Musk is against tariffs because Elon Musk gets all his parts for Tesla from Japan and China, and so cheap international sources are important for his profitability, which seems like a pretty reasonable thing to say. Elon Musk responded with insults on Twitter.
Mm. Right.
So, two people who are ostensibly at the inside of rulership in our country are negotiating in public in a way that is entirely unhelpful.
Hmm.
So we need to do better.
Yeah.
We need to start, you know, our conversation about tariffs. I just listened to Sherrod Brown, the former senator from Ohio, and he said, there are more options than indiscriminate,
Right.
unpredictable tariffs on the one hand, and neoliberal corporatism on the other.
Right.
That
Right.
free trade without any restraints is great for the stock market, but is bad for the worker.
Right.
And indiscriminate tariffs are bad for everybody.
Right.
So we don't go and choose the thing that's only good for the stock market and bad for the worker as the alternative. We have to find
Right.
a third way or multiple
Right.
ways. And we're not having that conversation, but we could be.
We
And you
could
and
be.
I are having that conversation. You and I
Yeah.
are saying, okay, so you and I aren't the answer to show up at the school board, but who might be?
Who might be? Yeah. Yeah. I definitely that's interesting. I was having that conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago. Um and I was admitting that, the idea, the concept of cracking down on the overbloated government is valid. You know, I cannot, yes, but the answer to that is not what we're doing now. And we can't just go back to the way it was either. And so you're right, there has to be a third way or another alternative.
And at the same time, what's horrendous right now is there are a number of critics saying anybody who says anything okay about tariffs is not doing a good job objecting to what's happening right now.
Yeah,
Anybody who says anything about how government isn't, it might be wasteful, isn't appropriately objecting to
right,
what's happening right now,
right,
because they're not taking the stand of the people whose jobs are on the line.
right, right.
And I think, we've lost the story here
Yeah.
because the third way is not insufficiently protesting the terrible things that's happening.
Mm,
It's saying we need to do something better.
that's right. That's it.
And, you know, it's not make America great again or make America healthy again.
And it's not bullying the rest of the world. either. Like, you can't use tariffs to bully people. This is basically what we're doing. Well, I'm going to tariff you. No, I'm going to tariff you. Like, come on, that's
Oh,
not the answer.
but the 1890s were not some golden age,
They were, they were not. You know what I mean? They were not.
right?
Right?
And coming up with the income tax was an effective solution to fund a bigger government for more people.
Yeah. Period.
And because the United States had outgrown other models of governance.
That's right. That's right.
So going back to a time where, you know, Rockefeller and Carnegie and, you know,
The Vanderbilts.
had more money than they knew what
Yeah.
to do with,
Yeah.
is wasn't a good time to be somebody who worked for the
That's right.
railroads or for the coal miners
Mm-hmm.
or for oil, big oil. I mean, I wonder, I wonder at the disconnect. So there's a um the guy has who created Yellowstone, right? He's got
Mm.
a bunch of TV shows on.
What's his name?
Uh,
Sheridan, Taylor Sheridan.
right. So I don't know if you've watched um Lioness,
I have actually.
which I'm on another at another point we should just do what's going on in the world of media and
Yeah.
have you and I talk about that. But um Billy Bob Thornton is in something called Landman.
Right, right.
Have you watched that?
I haven't, not yet. I
So this
haven't.
is another Taylor Sheridan thing.
Oh boy.
A- and and it's about the oil industry,
Okay.
which is why it came to mind.
Hmm.
And the disconnect in my mind is between Landman and just how hazardous the oil industry is for everybody but the person at top on top.
Hmm.
That, I mean, the situations they get into were precipitated by a not entirely uh, rare blowout that kills, 4 out of 5 of the guys on the team dealing with the oil well.
Right.
So people have been expendable for the sake of American capitalism from
Hmm.
the beginning.
From the beginning.
And all that we are saying is that we need a reasonable take on American capitalism that includes people. Sherrod
Hmm.
Brown is saying we need something that isn't crazy tariff regimes or a return to, what Timothy Snyder diagnosed as the politics of inevitability.
Inevitability. Right.
If we only listen to the great technocrats, then everything will work out.
Right.
So there's there has to be a better way. There has
Hmm.
to be a better way for our schools than a whole host of people go to public schools that don't do anything
Yeah. Yeah.
except for the advantaged few who go to good public schools or private schools.
Right. Right.
That's not working.
No, it's not working. Well, but who not working for whom? That's always the question.
So it's not working for the bulk of American people.
Right. That's the right.
I just visited the University of Minnesota at Twin
Mm.
Cities. There are 40,000 undergrads there.
Wow.
40,000
Wow.
undergrads. So, and this is, we have the largest high school graduation class in history. 3.9 million high school seniors are graduating
Mm.
this year. It's more than 1% of the country is graduating
Right.
this year.
Right.
So the college acceptance world is kaflooey,
Yeah.
is the technical term.
Yeah.
And for what? Because again, how many of these college students are going to come out without debt, who are going to come
Right.
out, as we've talked about, with good job prospects? I
Right.
mean, I've listened to a lot of college talks right now because I'm parent of a high school senior who's visiting
Yeah.
colleges, and employability is a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
Uh, So everyone, Ginny, my better half, has said, okay, we hear the word research from everybody, but what do they really mean? And what it's clear what they really mean is that this is a path to a job. That you're
Right.
not just going to be taking classes, you're going to be doing something that
Yeah.
will convince people to employ you.
Yeah. Well, because that was a dream that everyone sold us. You go to school to get the education that will prepare you for the real world. You get a good job because you're educated. Um, but like I've said many times before, by the time I got my degree, it didn't mean anything. A bachelor's degree didn't mean anything. You needed to get a master's. And then when you get
Right.
a master's, guess what? That doesn't mean anything either. So they move
Well,
those goalposts.
well, the meritocracy isn't for everybody. It's only for the people who already have the advantages.
Of course.
It's only for the elite.
Of course.
So we need to begin to enlist our elite friends in a populist cause
Int- and how, pray tell, can we pull that off?
with a vision of the good life in America that is shared by all, where the elite don't really have to give up that much because while the top fifth, the top quintile of America is doing well, and they're so worried about not doing as well as the top percent, we need to not be so worried.
Mm,
We need to see ourselves as relatively secure, secure enough to raise taxes on the super wealthy, secure enough to figure out school systems that offer non-college tracks
mm,
so that maybe some of our kids actually select some of those,
yeah. But that,
right?
you know what, that leads me back to my dilemma. It leads me back to my dilemma in the sense that how can you get people to do that? That's the problem. That's the problem is that the elite don't want to help those who are not elite. They don't want these things. They don't want these things for everybody. And so you're saying, yes, we should talk to our elite friends and convince them. Well, we've been trying to do that from the beginning.
Except we've bought into the zero sum language
Mm,
that we have to give something up for somebody else to do well, as opposed to a vision of a society where we're still doing well because everybody is doing well. And that when
yep,
when everybody has advantages, everybody benefits. And
right.
that um, you know, Ezra Klein talks about an abundance mentality.
Yeah.
And we need to embrace that. And
I hear you, man. I just that's a hard, as we say in the country, that's a long road to hoe.
yeah,
I just because it is so it is so countercultural. It is such a countercultural concept uh that even hearing you say that, and then I'm thinking about just my people in my congregation, they they don't even think that way, you know.
so I said I visited University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
My son and I flew into Minneapolis via O'Hare in
Mm,
Chicago. We didn't rent a car.
mm,
We walked to the light rail that is connected to the airport.
mm-hmm.
Getting our bag from leaving the gate to picking up our bags to walking to the light rail to checking into our hotel and walking from the light rail downtown was under an hour.
That's not bad.
The light rail part of it was the shortest part. It was only like 20 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Most of the rest of it was walking.
Mm-hmm.
We were there. We were in Minneapolis for 3 days. We only took a Lyft or a cab once.
Mm-hmm.
We walked or took buses everywhere. Minneapolis downtown is connected by skyways because they don't really like the winter, so they you can
Hmm.
walk inside
Mm-hmm.
uh, throughout the entire office complex of downtown. It's like 60 blocks interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not new. My
Right.
friend, who is my age, I mean, he's a little younger than I am, he being a Leo and I'm a Taurus, but we're both born in the same year. So we're both class of 92 from Middlebury.
Uh-huh.
And so he said, yeah, I used to be a Skyway rat. I I found my way throughout the Skyway for all the jobs I was working in before high school and during high school.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a decision by the companies in Minneapolis to devote a huge amount of their bottom line to a whole floor of the building that has is connected to a public access bridge system
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and parking system that is not closed to the public except, after 7 at night and before, 6 in the morning,
Right.
that everybody commits to clean and maintain. It is possible to sell this to Americans.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible to say the greater good is good for us all.
I agree with you. I have to. I have to agree with
But
you.
but you are right, it requires a significant culture shift.
Yes.
And Minneapolis is a bigger city than Buffalo, but
Mm-hmm.
in Minneapolis you can walk or take public transportation to every one of their big big league sporting arenas.
Right.
the they have an indoor football stadium that is downtown. It has its own train station. The Their stellar Big Ten school, again, 40,000 undergrads, has two campuses, one in
Mm-hmm.
Minneapolis, one in St. Paul, connected by their own bus system that takes 10-15 minutes maximum from each campus to the other.
Mm-hmm.
The bus runs every 5 minutes. It has a dedicated road that is closed to everything but buses and bicycles,
Mm-hmm.
so that it takes almost no time to go between these two campuses. It's possible to do this stuff.
It is.
And I'm not talking about Copenhagen or Beijing. I'm where there's a little bit more history. I'm talking about a red-blooded Midwestern state with a
Mm-hmm.
history of oppression and horrendousness, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, a decision to say, let's make it easier for everybody.
For everybody. Yeah. Yeah. That 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 keeps me from the brink of despair.
That was the whole idea. You
It
asked,
keeps
what
me
are we
from the
going to
brink of
do?
despair. Yeah.
And the answer is, not necessarily Minnesota nice, but a recognition that what they're what
Yeah.
that there is it is possible. All right.
Yeah.
So our next task is the beginning of who are our partners in organizing in downtown Orchard Park. So that if you
Yes.
are interested in this project, in organizing and going to town council meetings and uh, board of it and education
School.
meetings,
Yeah. School
school board
boards,
meetings,
city
uh,
council. Mm-hmm.
talk to us.
Yeah.
And maybe these meetings that we're having on Thursday will open up and we'll turn them into organizing meetings.
Yeah. I would love that. I would love that.
All right, Pastor Hughes, it is a pleasure always. And
Yes, always.
and thank you for asking the question that I'm grappling with so that I can use the answer we come up with to also avoid despair.
Yes. Yes. My pleasure. And thanks for giving me the space to say these things that I was whisper in the dark. It actually feels good for me to say it and then have a conversation about it. So I appreciate um, the space to be a bit vulnerable.
So that's the blessing we need to offer everybody. Come
Yeah.
and talk with us.
Yeah.
Come and say the things that are keeping you up at night,
Right.
because the only way we're going to solve them is by working on them together. Thank you
Yeah.
all. Have a great super day.
Have a good one.